T. Parker Host through someone else. I was the chairman of a board of all these international shippers and brokers. I was just a, sort of a glorified secretary, public relations person. Now, T. Parker Host was the Finnish consul and the, at one time he'd been the Norwegian consul, the Icelandic consul. I thought he was a really nice guy because he was outgoing, he seemed Virginian. I didn't know that much about him. But it turns out he has one shipping agency when I meet him in '85. He knows my husband's profession instantly because he brags about being with the mob. See, the mob runs the port of Norfolk. I mean, it's terrible to say, the bankers, and then they have I can't say that.
You can't say what?
No. The ports are run by, it's a homosexual hierarchy.
Okay, it makes sense. That's not objection.
Well, okay. And in Norfolk, it's Walter Chrysler, Phil Hornthal, they have the rich ones, and then they get the little ones in by introducing them to the big guys. It's like George met Einstein. Einstein was in that little ring that the Saudis were in. It was a very elite. Albert Einstein was in that little Princeton ring before he died. Okay. George, they partied together. Anyway, so the Norfolk crowd runs the port. It's very organized and so forth. And I knew the person who was running the Maritime Association shipping agency. Very nice man who was that way. But I didn't know it, I went out with him. I like him very much. I mean, he's a very nice person, completely. But he liked me, and I thought he was a wonderful guy. Well, his best friend was T. Parker Host. He lived with him for a while. Well, I didn't think anything about Parker because, he'd been married and had a couple of sons, and I thought, well, this is just a guy who's moved away from Newport News for some reason and settled in Norfolk. I thought it was unusual. He didn't have any friends. I didn't know. But it wasn't because of that. It was because Parker had some questionable associations with mob figures, with assassins. He was in the Burma Special Operations Command. He liked living a dangerous life, and he bragged about it to others. My husband and he gravitated to one another. And I thought it was wonderful because my husband didn't seem to have any friends. So I sort of fixed him up with Parker. Well, Parker's the one who did me in, Parker plotted, and it's a long story, but basically, and this sounds petty, but I wouldn't go out with him. And I'm not saying I did anything that was, it's just that he wasn't my type.
Obviously.
Well, I mean, not, but he just was, he's boorish, he's loud, he's kind of rude. So what happened was, because my husband is so close to Bush and McFarland and Scrowcroft and all these guys, Parker starts getting in with my husband's friends and cultivating them. And he goes from having one shipping agency to dotted all over the place. He goes from being a Democrat in petty little Virginia politics and being the Icelandic Finnish consul to having big shipping deals going through Iceland and Finland and Norway. And my husband's setting up deals in Moss, Norway, which I was the president of the Sister City Association. I was being used while they were setting up, shipment places, transshipment places. I mean, I was witnessing all of this, and it all came back to me, just boom, like that. But Parker, it was so interesting. We had a hearing. I had a hearing with my husband. That very day, George Bush was in town. my husband was in town. My home was broken into while I was in court. Very strategically, I was called by a Marine colonel named Jack, who is very involved with the maritime shipping business, and he knew that I know a lot about that. He called me and invited me as a guest of his to attend the George Bush huge banquet with John Warner while my house was being robbed. My car was sabotaged that day. And guess who introduced George Bush? T. Parker Host. Now, he made it to the big time. They get, when you get your Eagles, that's a German thing.
Okay.
You know, it's what the German high command did, and most of them, you know, had the boyfriends and stuff, the Krupps and all of that. It is a German thing that they say goes back to Greece, and it's all the male Marine-looking men that they do it with. See? So now the chiefs have to do that. What they do is they get, George said it's like a zoo. They get everybody really drunk. And they sometimes call it dining in. Shellback is another time that they do it. Not everybody does it, but the ones who do it, if they're young, they get right up to the top. It's a, they put them in the coffin and they do things. You know, I was always looking around for screwdrivers. Well, one day I come home and there are about 12 screwdrivers on the table, you know, neatly placed. Well, you can't call the police and say, I've got 12 screwdrivers, you know. You can't tell people that you've got black dots on all your white blouses. You know, your shoes are disappearing. And then, this is really, I called the police the first break-in, which was the night of March the 4th, the night before I went to see General Joy at the Marriott.
Yeah.
Well, I had already called the police when I was battered, because I was just bruises. I made O.J.'s wife look like Marilyn Monroe. I mean, you talk about. And I was doing this because I thought it would help him, you know, have 45s put to my head, and he's laughing. He'd strangled me and put his finger on my jugular vein, and he'd just say, now don't you dare move, you know, I mean. Or I'd be lying in bed, and he'd do a jap, where he'd just push me off the bed. You can't believe what horror I went through to try and get this man to understand what Christ's love is about. You know, people say, oh, well, you should have left. Well, I took my marriage vows seriously. I knew he was injured psychologically by the war, by whatever he was made to do. So, I mean, I'm fine. I just sacrificed a lot. I was in a big wrestling match with a crazy guy, you know. But I still love the little boy within. He's very troubled. But anyway, I called the police after a number of little break-ins. And guess what? The policeman they sent was a little short guy with a short haircut whose name was Shorty Satterwhite.
Okay. And
Shorty Satterwhite was saying, oh, now, Miss Griggs, now you're just making this up. Now, you know, Miss Griggs, this is just, you're just traumatized. Your husband's gone, blah, blah, blah. I found out he was a 20-year Marine.
Okay.
And not only that, but there's another part of his life. But that's okay. I mean, he's a nice guy. But he was a Marine. Of course he does. He's still reserve. So I think, okay, I'll call the FBI. You know, I'll let them know what's going on. I heard about the FISA court and that they, you know, because I'm talking about William Colby.